We are back with Drop In and Learn. My name is David Toddington, your host, and with me today is Arno Russer, probably one of the best known names in open source intelligence in the world today, and certainly for over a decade now. Welcome to the program, Arno, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now, Arno, as we get started straight away, maybe you could just tell me a little bit about your background and what it is that led you to this place, the place you're now in, and what you're doing now.
Well, my background is, and you may not believe that, my background is I was a member of a spying organization. I was invited in 1990 by the Dutch Defense Intelligence and Security Service to come and join them and establish their open source intelligence shop, because they had heard about things that you can do via the internet. They knew me from previous jobs. I could create information based on information I found using commercial databases, LexisNexis, Factiva, Dialog, ProQuest, and the internet, which in the 1990s was brand new in the Netherlands. It hardly existed. I was one of the very few, the very first to use the internet. So I established this open source intelligence production facility for the Dutch Defense Intelligence Service, which grew completely out of hand. I got more and more personnel. I had to be a manager, blah, blah, blah. In 2008, I was invited so often that customers asked me, Arno, can we not simply pay you for your services? Well, you can't. You cannot simply hire a spy or something. So I asked the Minister of Defense for permission to establish my own company next to my work for the service, which was granted after a half year of research, which got out of hand completely. So in 2013, I resigned my job, and now I devote all my time to my company, Versus Information Services, since a couple of weeks, in conjunction with another company, a Triangular Group Academy, to teach open source intel all over the world, to help law enforcement, investigative services, intelligence services, universities, companies, international missions, etc., get a better information position so they can get better information. And that's basically what I do. It's the best job ever. I absolutely love sharing what I know with anybody who wants to learn.
Absolutely. Now, you've been involved in that very important transition, as you say, in government agencies, where at the time, and we're going back about to the early 1990s now, working within those organizations, everything was very secretive. The internet as we know it today didn't really exist. And you were part of this initial movement to start bringing in these various open sources. We now have approximately 80–90% of intelligence that these sort of organizations work with is coming via open sources. Now, over these last number of decades, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen, and what has also kind of stayed the same?
Well, what stays the same is requirement analysis, which is the step in the entire intelligence cycle process, where you actually define what exactly do you want to know. And people typically start with a very wide question, not being able to find anything, or they find way too much information or data, and they get lost and they have no idea what to do. And this problem of a proper system to establish what exactly do we need to know and what plan follows from that action is the same for the last, God knows how many years. It will never change. It's the approach. People want to do things simple. They like to do things simple. They don't want to be involved in finding out how does LexisNexis exactly work. You can do amazing things with ProQuest Dialog. You can actually get answers to questions once you do once you do the training to use that system. But if people are Googled, which means 2 words, 1 search box, and you get 10 million hits, and they think that's good, yeah, that's a problem. That's not going to work. That's the same.
People typically want the easy way, don't they? I mean, just show us the bullet point list on how to do something. Don't really want to have to think about it, and really would prefer to memorize or to follow a list of a process as opposed to actually thinking. So what I'm hearing from you is thinking about what you're doing is really important. Now, with this in mind, let's move towards the intelligence cycle. And this is an area where you've been a real innovator. What we typically think of as the intelligence cycle is we start out with planning and collection, we move into evaluation, collation, and then we get into that sort of that gray area or the dark art of analysis. and then finally is the dissemination. Now, you've kind of changed that model quite a bit. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. And I think you've got a couple of diagrams that you can actually show us as well.
Yeah, I would love to show that, David. And we've practiced this before we went online, and I still can't share my screen.
Okay, let's.
I have a screen saying here, advanced sharing options, all panelists, all panelists.
Okay, so let's go back.
And I can't do anything. In the meantime, for our listeners and viewers, while I'm continuously trying to share my screen with everybody, what I've done is we all know the intelligence cycle, isn't it? The intelligence cycle traditionally is really a cycle. It's a circle, which in my humble opinion is rather funny because intelligence work is not done in a circle. Who has ever heard of a police officer or an investigator running around in circles? That idea is completely ludicrous. So I changed that into an aircraft propeller with the customer in the middle. And it is around the customer that everything revolves. And the propeller consists of 3 parts. The first part is requirement analysis. I still can't share my screen.
Yeah, I've made you the host, so you should be the host right now and should have that capability. Otherwise, you might just have to get very descriptive in telling us how that works.
Yeah, let's do that, because this really doesn't work.
Okay.
Which is slightly annoying because I had a wonderful picture for you all. But anyway, so this propeller consists of 3 parts. The first part is requirement analysis, where you're trying to find out what exactly is it that the customer wants. Then we do a source analysis, and after that we do a collection analysis. And then we go back to the customer to ask the customer, is this still what you want? Because time has progressed. And maybe the requirement has changed, which is not reflected in the circle, it is in the propeller. If the customer says, well, new developments, I want you to do it again, we'll again through this loop. If the customer says, well, get on with the collection phase, we go to the second part of the propeller, which is the collection phase. The collection phase consists of collecting information from all kinds of sources, maybe also sources that are not strictly open source. We go through a validation phase, we go through a monitoring phase, we go through a fusion phase to get everything together and create one decent report based on open source information. And then finally an indexing phase, because we want to be able to store the information in such a way that you can find it back. Then we go to the customer, look, this is what we found in open sources. This is our report purely based on what we found in open sources, which may be unreliable. Would you like us to go through the third loop of the propeller, which is the intelligence analysis part? I don't call this analysis anymore, I call that synthesis, because analysis is done in every loop. Everybody in every step does analysis. So to have this exclusively for just one part of the process is ridiculous. I call that synthesis. The second step in that loop is presenting, then distribution, and then knowledge management, because you want to learn from it. And then you go back to the customer who probably has new questions, etc., etc., etc.
So I see a number of advantages here. I mean, first of all, the customer, whether it's private sector and you're actually dealing with a customer and providing that service, or it's your manager if you're working in the public sector, they're more involved, they're more engaged in the process this way. It helps keep you on track as you move forward, because the customer will probably always have more information than you're ever going to have. And it allows you a more dynamic, I guess we could say customer service advantage, but it's also allowing that more dynamic environment as well. You're getting feedback from the customer on an ongoing basis.
You're absolutely right, Dave. It's this interactive process with the customer that is essential to know what you're doing. I've had an occasion once, this is really interesting to know, where a Intel service said to me, well, somebody in the audience said to me when I did the presentation, Mr. Roycer, I don't agree with you. We don't have any customers. We are Intel. We are completely independent. We do not have any customers. We wish to be independent, which I respect. But I don't understand that at all, because somebody pays your salary. Somebody pays for the building that you work in. There is always a customer somewhere. So I really think, and that is something that you won't find in any intelligence cycle, the customer is really the pivotal point. It's the most important part there is. And being interactive with the customer allows us to understand more and more of what the customer really wants. Because in the first stages, they will come back with very vague questions. Can I have everything about Mr. X? You don't want me to find everything about Mr. X, because if I don't like you, I will. all right? And I've done that once with somebody I didn't like, and I never saw him back. So if there is something like a trust relationship developing, you get more insight information, more classified information that can really help you focus your research and get pinpoint answers to questions to your customer. And that is so tremendously important to get this trust relationship with your customer. That's why I was trained to the highest level. So I could also help signals intelligence analysts, and they could actually tell me what exactly they were looking for. Not everything about or the general picture or that kind of crap. The kind of things, but more precise questions. I have one little story to share with you.
Yes, please do.
I have one little story to share with you, and this is based on the true fact, but I've changed it a little bit to protect those involved. There was a commando coming to me, special forces, visiting me. He was very unhappy with the services of the Dutch Defense Intelligence Service because he had asked for a security report, a report on the security situation in Afghanistan. That was it. Security situation in Afghanistan. And he got back a report this thick describing the strategic security in that country. And that's not what he wanted. Nobody had ever bothered to ask him, what exactly do you mean with security? What exactly do you mean with Afghanistan? Because that's a very large country. Guess what he meant? He's a commander. He's used to deliver violence. He doesn't need a strategic report on how dangerous the enemy is. All he wants to know is the things that he was never trained to do. Guess what? What he meant with security was, all he wanted was a little piece of paper, an A4 paper, with pictures of nasty little creepy animals that you do not wish to find in your shoes early in the morning when you wake up. Like spiders, scorpions, black widows, all that kind of stuff. That's what he called security. But nobody bothered to ask him, what exactly do you do? What exactly do you need that information for? It's a wonderful example of how important requirement analysis is.
Do you see that one of the big problems here, and thank you also to one of our attendees who has just sent a link to your intelligence cycle, the PDF document on your website. So if you are attending live right now, you can just simply go to the chat session. I just posted it to all attendees. You can click on that link and you can then bring up the PDF cycle. And for those that are watching this on YouTube, we'll edit that in, so you'll be able to see that a little bit later on as well. Arno, you bring up a really good point here. That is, would you suggest that sometimes people don't know what they're asking for? I mean, one of the things that I often observe is that there's some really good open source intelligence people out there that use the internet as one source very, very effectively. And to those that are the customer, and we'll say the decision makers, the end user of the intelligence product that is being created, they often don't know what actually happens. So I think your story just now really illustrates the point well. They often don't know what they're asking for, or maybe their language is wrong. So again, your model speaks very well to this because you're constantly going back to the customer and asking and clarifying what the question is. Do you find it also really prompts the customer to think more carefully about what they're asking as well?
Yeah, well, there's many reasons why customers don't ask you a proper questions. I won't go through all these reasons right now, but a couple of them are obvious. One is secret; they can't share that. Two, they simply don't know themselves. That's why they ask you. Three, they are afraid to make a fool of themselves, admitting to a low hierarchy librarian that they don't know something. For many other reasons there why people can't ask you the proper questions. And that's why this interactivity is so important, and that's why this trust relationship is so important. I'm not there to make fun of you, I'm actually there to help you. I'm not asking all these counter questions to make a fool of you. I'm just trying to find out what exactly is it that you want. There's only one thing more dangerous than wrong information, and that is too much information, or too many. I never know the difference in English. That's really
one of the things I often think about, I have an interest in photography, and one of the things that makes a great photographer is not someone that just understands lenses and cameras and lighting and focal length and depth of perception. They know how to interact with the person, and I'm thinking portraiture photography. They know how to interact with their subject. They know how to get those expressions. They know how to get the best out of them.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is much the same thing with you, is that what you're saying is it's important to create a relationship with the customer, with whoever that end user is.
Absolutely.
That there are no stupid questions. I mean, there are times when people will feel perhaps they don't understand exactly what they're asking for. They may get defensive. So what I'm hearing from you is it's important that you develop the skills to break down those barriers as a good open source intelligence operator as well.
Correct. You have to realize that a properly trained professional OSINTian can do things that our customers don't know about. And customers typically have a tendency, that's what I do in the restaurant, to ask a OSINTian what they think the OSINTian understands, or what they think an OSINTian can find. But they have no idea what I'm capable of. They have no idea what's in LexisNexis. They have no idea how I can manipulate dialogue progress databases to produce new information and new answers to customers. Instead, what they ask me is, this license plate, what country is that? That's not what they wanted to know. All they wanted to know is, where are these invading troops coming from? Had you asked me that, it would have saved me a lot of time. And I had found you a lot more relevant and interesting information. And it's completely logical, because what OSINTians do is they lock themselves up in a room somewhere down in a building, and they sit down and wait for customers to come in. Whereas I say, I want my personnel with the customer, with the police. I want my librarians to work with the police officer, to be with the police officer, to have a beer with the police officer, so they can adapt and learn how they think, and what they do, what information they need, what for, in what time frame, etc., etc., etc. It's really important to understand the customer, know your profession, know how to translate a requirements into a proper question and into a workable answer, to the workable intel, and then go back to the customer. Is there anything else I can do for you? Because there's typically much more information out there that they want to have.
And then there's a team dynamic. I mean, to use your term, the OSINTian, I'm very fond of saying the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. We are working in a very fast-changing world where technology is constantly moving and changing, and it's a struggle to stay on top of these changes, new databases that are coming out, new ways of using those databases as well. What do you suggest as far as the creation of an OSINT team? What are you looking for in creating an OSINT team?
I'm looking for people who have a basic training to be an information professional, which in the United States and Canada is a very high level education. In Europe, it isn't. They have to be aware of the world of information, of the global information landscape, of basic search techniques, basic Boolean techniques, etc., etc. It's a 4-year university level education. And then you're going to specialize in a certain subject area. You're going to specialize in, let's say, human trafficking, fascism, or whatever subjects are interesting to investigative. I'm talking investigative here, but the same applies to corporate intelligence, where people are actually trying to find out how exactly does the market look like for dairy products or whatever. Intelligence is much more than just military intelligence, strategic, or law enforcement. So
right.
That is essential.
The contextual understanding is critical, is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. I'll give you one example. I know a OSINT researcher who wanted to know the production capability of the competition in Eastern Europe. What he did was he looked at satellite pictures of their production facility. He saw the gigantic towers where they store their dairy products, and he saw a shade of that tower. So he looked at the time of that picture, measured the length of the shadow, and from that tried to figure out, using mathematics, how high is that tower to have an indication of their production facility, capability. That's OSINT. That's OSINT analysis, based purely on open sources. There's so many more things you can do there, but you have to know something about corporate intelligence. You have to know something about the subject that you're working with. Otherwise, forget it. I've done that work. It was my first job ever at the nuclear research facility, the Central Bureau of Nuclear Measurements. Fantastic people, super researchers. I had no idea what they were talking about. The architecture of cadmium 109, that was the first question they asked me. No idea. What do you want me to do? I resigned after 6 months. I have nothing to share there.
Mm-hmm. So contextual understanding, thinking outside the box is what I'm hearing from you. When you talk about analyzing an image and taking a look at a shadow, for example, I mean, that is really, truly creative thinking as well as logical thinking. So combining all of these different things together. Tell me about your position on artificial intelligence. There are numerous companies out there selling some very expensive solutions and some pretty bold claims sometimes when it comes to artificial intelligence algorithms that, I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but press a button, enter a name, and all will be revealed. What are your feelings on artificial intelligence and how that is going to impact the OSINT landscape?
Thank the Lord, it doesn't work. So we still have a job. Now, seriously, progress there scientifically is fantastic. They can do amazing things, but the problem is always the same. Things are turned around. The first thing they do is they look at the tool, and then they try to figure out which questions can we answer with our tool. But I do this the other way around. I had a presentation once on A2 Analyst Notebook, this very famous analysis program that you can buy for a lot of money, fantastic software. And this presenter showed me how it worked, and he had a basic set of data in that presentation. And in about 10 minutes, he had fantastic spider webs on the screen that grew and grew and grew until you saw only probably one big black spot. And I couldn't make any sense of it. So I raised my hand and asked this man, all right, I'm trying to find a criminal. Where is he? All I want to know, where is the man? And he had no idea what I was talking about. And that is basically the big problem with OSINT today, where many people on the web seem to think that OSINT is a tool to do some things that you and I have been doing for the last 30 years, and that's it. And it isn't. OSINT is a process. And the first thing you do when you want to use all this fantastic software, all these fantastic tools and artificial intelligence, first you want to know what exactly am I looking for, then you're going for the tool, then you can be successful, not the other way around. I know solutions where companies will provide you with real-time translation of foreign media broadcast in Arab, in Persian, in Afghan, in Farsi, in whatever. They provide that live translation into any language you like, and they will send that to your television or your tablet or your phone. You can enter your profile there if you're looking for something. If you're waiting for a speech by a minister or a speech by a terrorist leader or whatever. Fantastic software, unless you don't know what to do with it. And that happens so often. That happens so often. Have a look at, just type in internet OSINT tools, and you will see many, many people there really thinking OSINT is kind of tool. And that's it. It really is.
So I guess what we could say is, with regards to these tools, it's how you use them. I guess it's a little bit like, if you had the money and you wanted to drive fast, you could go and buy yourself a Formula One race car, but without the proper training, something bad is probably going to happen driving a vehicle around with that kind of power. You're not going to be getting the most out of it, and you might even do some damage.
Well, that's what people tell me. They like my training programs because I'm a librarian. I know about information. I know how to get information that is not on the internet. That's where I start with. I start with people explaining what information is out there on the internet that is not World Wide Web, which is something that nobody understands. Then I'm going to continue. What information can you find out there, readily available in open sources, that is not on the internet? That is a lot. That is a lot. You may think otherwise, but there's a hell of a lot of information out there that you will never be able to find on the internet. And OSINT is a collaborative, holistic system. All other sources join in, otherwise OSINT doesn't make any sense at all. I can't do OSINT for market analysis or law enforcement on its own. It's not an island on its own. I want to combine open sources with security cameras, with cash registries, with information from cleaning ladies, taxi drivers, etc. Fantastic information sources. Great people too, by the way. But I tend strongly to consider them as information sources.
Right.
Somebody's asking David about social networks.
Yes, we have a question. I'll just read it out quickly. What about social networks? How much valuable information is it possible to get from those? And do you encounter legal and privacy related challenges in the OSINT process? how do you deal with these challenges? So a two-part question, really, and I think that's an important one with regards to the privacy and the legal. But let's deal with the first part of that initially. What is it possible in your experience to get from social networks?
Yeah, that is with all respect for the person who asked this question, how much valuable information that is completely dependent on my question, what I'm trying to research. There's a lot of junk out there on social networks, but you can also find pinpoint pearls of information that can guide you into the correct direction to find more valuable information. But you must have a very specific question. If I'm trying to hunt down a person, I can't find the person, what I may want to do is try to identify a network of people that are known with this particular person. If I find activities that may be typical for that person, or I profile that person, I have a picture of somebody wearing golden rings, golden necklaces, nice suit, two blondes on his arms, with respect, by the way, and a beautiful car in the background. That's maybe somebody who tries to show off, who likes to show how good he is, how rich he is. What do people do who are rich? They go to the beach and drive up and down with their car. What do people do when they're rich? They are a member of a gentleman club. They have websites. They go to big parties. Who else goes to big parties? Do these people publish pictures about that on social media? Now I have a question. Can I find pictures of parties in this particular area where this person shows up? Get me those pictures. And there, social media can be of a tremendous value. But don't just dive in there hoping for the best, because you won't. There's so much junk out there, it's really a mess. But if you have very specific questions, like I just told you, lovely scenario, then it can be really helpful. Ask your local policeman, they know.
So there's an awful lot of noise for the signal you're going to get. And then what you're saying as well is it's very important, establish the network of people around your primary target and look at what they're saying and watch what they're doing. And then that may apply to geographical areas as well. And it's interesting, isn't it, that hubris wins out so many times with people on social media. They just have to show off. And in doing that, at a time when they may not feel threatened, when they become threatened at some point, or then they feel there's a need for privacy, it's difficult to pull that back, isn't it?
Yeah, that's another point. Legal and privacy challenges, of course there are, because maybe I'm not allowed to collect all that information. Maybe, well, for the Dutch police anyway, the Dutch police is not allowed to just simply follow anybody on the network. You have to have a case by a prosecutor, an official case approved by a judge. Then you can go on with your investigations. You cannot simply scan the net for interesting developments like these ex-bloody blah parties and follow people. That's really a legal constraint.
This is an important point as well, Arno, because different legislation in different parts of the world. Now, for those that are watching this from North America, they may not be familiar with GDPR. Maybe you can just tell us very briefly about the General Data Protection Regulations in the EU and how that impacts the world of OSINT.
Well, the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations, tries to protect people, protect people's privacy, which basically means, and I'm not a specialist there, but it basically means that you cannot simply use somebody else's private data without having a written official permission to do so. Which means that I cannot send invitations for my training to just anybody I know, because I need permission of these people. I can't send them a newsletter because I need permission from these people. For the investigators amongst you, this is also the reason why JANA, the Internet Assigned Knowledge Authority, has emptied all these WHOIS records. So I cannot find out who is the owner of a particular domain name, which I find completely ridiculous because I deliver that data myself. Of course I want that to be published. It's a real hindrance, it's really annoying, especially in law enforcement, because if I have collected information in the incorrect way, I cannot even use it in a case. I have to throw it away. I've had that a couple of times.
Right, so evidentiary
it's one of the reasons why people hire me to do research, because I'm not constrained too much with that, and I can at least give an indication to people as to what's going on. But it's a real hindrance, further to that is an ethical question, and that is sometimes if I really dig, if I really do my best, I can find information that I feel that I ethically cannot use. I'm not supposed to find that information. Is that still legal to use? I think so. Is that a privacy issue? Oh yeah. Is that an ethical issue? Oh, much more than that. Okay. If somebody has a phone completely unprotected, no passwords, no logon ID, no nothing, and I find all kinds of compromising pictures on there, is that open source data? Can I use that? Maybe I can, but I won't. I don't consider that open source information anymore because I just know those pictures were not supposed to be in the open domain. It's really a tricky field out there. Of course, we use the information, but I go to a police officer and tell them this is what I found. You decide what legal measures do you need to take to be able to be allowed to use that data. Does this make any sense?
Absolutely.
So
what you're saying is go in with your eyes open, understand the legal implications of what you're doing, and act in good faith, I think, is what's really important as well. And as you point out, the consequences could be quite significant. You could put a lot of time into the collection of intelligence, which becomes evidence. And if it's not collected properly, it's going to be inadmissible in court.
Correct.
Yes,
absolutely
exactly.
Arno, the word here to use is ethics.
Yes.
Am I really going that far? And sometimes I find things that I think that you can't do that. You cannot do that. But anyway.
Absolutely. Arno, we're running out of time very quickly, as we knew was going to happen. Now, your Pathfinder, your highly acclaimed Pathfinder courses, you're now offering those remotely as well because of the COVID-19 crisis. Maybe tell us a little bit about your courses and how people can find out about those.
Well, the Open Source Intelligence Pathfinder training course is a 3-day training course where I take you through the entire intelligence cycle. And it will teach you in 3 days of hard work, I warn you now, how to produce proper intelligence from open sources only. I'm going to share with you the Reuser methodology of doing this structured, planned, systematic, in such a way that you can apply that in any subject, in any field, it doesn't matter. I will share this methodology with you in a practical way. I want you to actually change your habits. I want you to apply this tomorrow, immediately. And since a couple of weeks, I do this together with another company, the Triangular Group Academy, who will do all the organization for me. It's a fantastic company that has done much training on intelligence for the Netherlands and international, and they will help me publish this training. In addition to the Pathfinder, I also deliver a Scout and an Explorer, which are 1-day training programs where I specifically aim at certain aspects of the circle. Let's say just Boolean logic or requirement analysis, or how can I safely send email, or how can I search the internet privately, as private as possible, etc., etc. We do this preferably in a classroom environment, because that's the best way of teaching. But for people who can't travel to The Hague, the Netherlands, I cannot imagine why not, because it's a fantastic country. But I can imagine that if you live in Vancouver, there, that's a long way of traveling. We try to offer this via e-learning, via Zoom, for instance, which is a pretty good alternative, or even a completely do-it-yourself training via Moodle.
Okay. And how can people find out about your training courses? Where do they go online?
Oh, Reuser.biz. Just my family name, my surname, Reuser, R-E-U-S-E-R.biz. Or type in Arno Reuser and you'll find many links to me and about me, luckily. You can even go to YouTube, type my name in and find some presentations, briefings, etc. Of me, so you can get an idea of what it's about.
Okay, perfect. Well, Arno, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here today. We really appreciate it. It's great to catch up with you and always wonderful to hear, again, the innovation in which you approach this, I think is really important. And the way we think about this, the way we deconstruct the questions and the way we rethink the whole intelligence cycle is so vitally important. So thank you, Arno.
David, thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure and a privilege, and I certainly hope it's not the last time.
Oh, it won't be. That much is for sure. Thanks, Arno.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Participants, thank you very much for listening.